Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be jumping into bid management, which is the next step of the 7-step sourcing process. So in our last video, we saw collateral development, all the documents required for the RFP. So now we're going to be talking about how this is going to be released to the vendors and how you're going to manage that whole process. So without waiting further, let's jump right in. All right, so what is bid management all about? So let's jump into the objective of this stage. So the objective of this stage is, this is a stage where the rubber meets the road. So this is where you're going to communicate to your vendors that, hey, we want to do an RFP and we want to actually engage you as part of that process. So the important thing is you are communicating via email here or any other platform that you have, but in most cases, it's going to be an email. And you want to make sure that your communication is clear and concise and call out all the requirements. So if you're talking about attaching your documents along with the email, you want to list those documents out and let them know what is required or expected of each and every single document. So in bottom line, make sure it's clear, make sure it's concise so that the vendors can go through the documents as needed. So for your initial communication, you're looking at an email as the mode of communication, as I mentioned earlier. As a groundwork, you can actually reach out to the vendors beforehand and collect all the required information, such as emails, best point of contact, and who all should be part of this process. If you have an accurate point of contact details, then that basically means this RFP is going to go to the right people. In some cases, if you send it to the sales email, it might just sit there. They might not know who it needs to go to. So it's always good to do that groundwork beforehand. And each vendor should be getting a separate email. So I have heard or seen in the past where people, send one blast email, but they BCC all the vendors. Do not do that. Because you want to keep track of the communication with each vendor separately. You want to keep track of whether they want to participate. You want to make sure that you can collect the questions that they have or even their proposals. So it's best to keep a separate track for each. And this actually just helps with the organization aspect, because the more complex the RFP or the more bigger the list is, the more difficult it becomes for you to actually manage everyone in one email. So therefore, separate emails is the best way to go. And here's an example of a simple email thread. It's basically like, my name is hello person. My name is, introduce yourself, and you're a sourcing manager at XYZ company. You'd like to invite, their company for an RFP for certain products. And then you call out what are the attached RFP, what all is included in that email. So you've got the RFP document, supplier questionnaire submission sheet, bid sheet, scope of work documents, and terms and conditions. You also want to, include a intent. So if you recall my previous email, if you recall my previous video, I had called out that you want to confirm the intent of the vendor. So you want to make sure that you're giving them a deadline, and usually I give them 48 hours after receipt of this email. Now you could actually time this in a way that you can get the maximum value. So therefore you want to make sure that you're giving them 2 business days to make that decision, and not 2 weekends or weekend like a Saturday, Sunday. So make sure you actually are thinking through that process. Now, on the internal side, you want to create a centralized RFP tracker. So what this document will do is it'll create a single document where all the communication can be captured. It is a simple Excel sheet, and you can make the different headers different sheets. So you can have a sheet for the suppliers invited. You can talk about what the different things are. And the intent is to kind of create that single document. You could actually have, as I mentioned, something simple as supplier name, initial outreach, intent to participate, and reason that they decline. So sometimes suppliers might not want to participate in the RFP because they don't have the resources, or they are constrained and have other projects that are critical. So it's important to understand why they're not joining. And keep this document as your central communication tracker. So you could actually give others access to this document if you're working in a shared collaborative environment. So that way they can also get the updates in there. There's a centralized information so that everyone's seeing the same thing at any point of time. The next piece is the bid questions. So if you recall in the last video, I had called out that you want to let the vendors ask questions about the RFP, about the scope, anything that you've sent out. So instruct the vendors or remind them to put their questions in the supplier questionnaire bid sheet. So this is the organized way that you can collect the information back. Provide a due date when we'll respond. So generally, my rule of thumb is after they have submitted the intent to participate, I would generally give them another 24 hours for them to submit their bid, their questions, or even 48 hours. And then you should, in turn, take 48 hours, 48 or 2 business days to review this with your stakeholders and provide that response. Now, one key thing about the response is that you're responding to everyone and you're giving them all the same answers. So this is to ensure there's fairness. You do not want to leave a critical piece of information out from one vendor or the other. On the other hand, if some other vendor asked a question that you think is important, you want to make sure that everyone gets that same response. So in some cases, you actually would have to mask, not necessarily mask, but you would have to kind of make the communication simple and straightforward so that it's not to a particular vendor, but it goes to everyone. So that way, no one can come point fingers at you saying that this RFP was conducted in an unfair manner. And we're coming to the last part of this video, which is the things to keep in mind. So what's the one thing that you want to do is you want to ensure that this is an objective, fair RFP. You want to give all the vendors a even opportunity to be able to put their best foot forward. So make sure that all the information is going to them, all the vendors at the same time. Ensure that any extension to the deadlines, everyone gets the same extension, even if they did not ask for it. If you're giving one, you should be able to extend that to others. There are some instances where you're only giving a special extension to one vendor versus the other. I will leave that up to you, but rule of thumb, extension goes to everyone else. And most importantly, communication. So you should have a one point of communication. So if you are the sourcing manager, you are the point of communication for the vendors with your company. So if they do go to talk to your stakeholders, that's a no. So you need to actually correct that behavior and let them know that any such behavior can be grounds for disqualification from the RFP. So make sure that you're really clear about that. This also ensures that the stakeholders are not inundated with different communications. So think about it, right? If you have 5 different vendors that have 50 different questions and they're sending all of them to the stakeholders, they're going to get overwhelmed and they're going to get confused. And not that they can't answer it, but they have other things to do as well. So this is where you as a sourcing manager are taking lead on this RFP and you're actually putting that concise communication forward, and you could become the internal communication piece to your stakeholders. And last but not least, keep everything documented. This is to ensure that should there be any reference point or any question that may come up from your internal stakeholders or even from the vendor, you can actually come back to them and say relay that information back and you have everything documented. So this is to keep a trail of the documents, ensure that if there's any doubts or anything that comes up that might not look right, you actually have something to reference back. Hey guys, so that was today's video, bid management, the next stage of the 7-step sourcing process. This is where all your hard work is coming into sort of being worked on it. You're getting this out to the market, so you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. This is also an opportunity for you to forge relationships with the vendors. So the more organized you are here, regardless of the outcomes of the RFP, you can actually build relationships with vendors, because the world, it's a really small world and it's a really, really small industry for the respective sort of scopes you're talking about. So one way or the other, your paths with the suppliers will cross. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining a good relationship with them. You're putting putting a good foot forward, and you're also representing the company in the right light. So with that, I'll see you in the next one. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. And I'm always looking for any feedback about how we can actually improve on this. So thank you very much for joining on this video. I'll see you on the next one.